Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi everybody, my name's Larry Thomas and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi Larry.
And I want to thank you guys for inviting me to come out and be with you. It's good to be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Good to be out of my room. And want to welcome the new people, especially the brand new ones. While I was up there, I was watching CNN, and they came out with a cure for alcoholism in Switzerland. It comes in the form of a pill. So don't rush into this thing. There's hope on the horizon, you know. I wondered what two would do, you know. And I wonder if you could crush them up and snort them, maybe. Just get this thing moving right along here, huh? I want to thank Tom for inviting me out here. Tom picked me and Ruth up at the airport, and I made the mistake of asking him how he was doing. He just got done telling me about 10 minutes ago. Just proud member of On and On. I ran into a kid out in the lobby when we got here, and he said, I feel like I'm in hell. I said, well, you're close. Tom says I didn't need to give you my best talk. He said anything would help you. So I'll start right there. But that kid said, he says, I feel like I'm in hell. And it reminded me of a story a guy told me a while back about this guy that died and went to hell. He's walking around down there with the long face. The devil comes up to him and he says, why the long face? The guy says, well, I'm down here in hell. And he says, for God's sakes. He says, did you ever drink? And he goes, yeah. And he says, well, you're going to love Mondays down here. We've got whiskey, we've got Old English, we've got Mad Dog, we've got Thunderbird. Hell, you don't have to worry about getting alcoholism. Hell, you're dead. The guy says, did you ever do any dope? And he goes, a little. And he says, well, that's the kind of lion that got you down here. He says, you're going to love Tuesdays down here. We've got heroin, we've got hash, we've got crack, we've got LSD. You don't have to worry about overdosing. Hell, you're dead. He says, do you like to gamble? And he goes, yes. He says, well, you're going to love Wednesdays. We've got poker, we've got the ponies, we've got pan, we've got slot machines. You don't have to worry about going broke. Hell, you're dead. He says, do you like to smoke? And he goes, I love it. And he goes, well, you're going to love Thursdays. We've got Cuban cigars. We've got Camels. We've got Viceroys. We've got pipes. You don't have to worry about getting cancer. Hell, you're dead. He says, are you gay? And he goes, no. And he says, well, you're going to hate Fridays. It's not as bad as it seems. I don't ever want to forget what it's like to be new in Alcoholics Anonymous. Don't ever want to forget what it's like to be alone in these rooms and surrounded by a couple hundred people or your home group or something like that and not fitting in. Nobody talking to you, you know. Little things like putting your hand out mean a lot to a new guy or gal. Sometimes I get so complacent and so wrapped up in my own self that I forget to do that even in my home group today. I get so wrapped up in my own little buddies and stuff, you can't peel me off the wall, you know. So I always want to keep an eye out for that new guy and make sure that I welcome him. My sponsor tells me that I'm living proof that a man can stay sober for a little over 28 years and not amount to a damn thing. So I don't know where you think you're going if you're new, But the highest I've ever gotten here was sober, basic human being, active member of my own home group. And that's about as high as I need to get. I've sponsored a couple of guys who have gotten higher than that, and they're totally useless to anybody and anything around them. I always want to be an active member of my home group because it seems to be the thing in my life to keep my ego small enough to serve you. And that's what it's all about. To be a service to you and everybody around me. And that's how important a home group and having jobs in a home group is for me. Now, I've got a great family. I don't have any reason as far as love or anything like that why I drank. I was born in Detroit, come out to California when I was about 4 years old. Brought up in a little foster home. My mom and dad finally got together, and we all started the family again like that. And my mom's a great lady. My mom's a little Scandinavian lady, and she loves diet pills. She was always eating that speed and running around the house, and making Afghans, and at all hours of the night there was Afghans being made, and you can hear her in the next room. It was a small house. We didn't have a lot of money, and you can just hear her in the next room just going to town, man. And everything in the house had fresh Afghans on it. The chairs, the couches, my dad's golf clubs had little poodle heads that she knit. If there's any animals, they had a fresh vest on, And no matter what time you got up, she was up doing something, with your toothbrush, just cleaning stuff, And I had no idea that I just laid eyes on my first tweaker, And she was always up doing stuff, and she had a favorite hobby, and that hobby was to take that speed and make jigsaw puzzles. These 40 million piece jigsaw puzzles, of the Mojave Desert, and gonna be a beige night tonight, honey, and she had a little routine. She'd run off to Save-Ons and cash in her prescription, and she'd always get her a carton of Raleigh cigarettes because she saved the coupons, to buy more yarn. It was a hideous cycle she was caught up in, Come home, eat a couple more Dexys, put on her one and only moo-moo, start putting together this puzzle. She had a piece that didn't fit. She had a big pair of toenail clippers, so she'd snip that son of a bitch down, and wedge that baby in there. Now, when you got a mom that determined, she's got certain rules around that house. And one of them is don't play in the gutter, you'll get polio. And the other one, ironically, is burnt food is good for your gums, Because she'd start stuff and it would just get away from her, and she'd give you this plate that was on fire, Don't you make that face. This burnt food is good for your gums, And she didn't have a tooth in her head at the time, God damn it, don't you make, But I love my mom, and I still do, But what was to come out in an inventory in Alcoholics Anonymous, fourth and fifth step, is something that happened that very time of my life that would follow me up until and after I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and that is what I would do with people that would give me love and attention and affection, especially her. And that is I'd play her like a fiddle. That there would never be a time too inconvenient for me not to put the touch on that lady. And I never want to forget what it's like to be a young man, being put away for a short period of time, no big-time convict, still in high school. Supposed to come back and supposed to show up at the house, but I don't show up at the house, and I don't show up at Monday. I show up on a Thursday or Friday, and I show up at my mom's place of business. And it's a cold April morning, and I'm standing in this parking lot of this dry cleaners. And the rain's hitting me, and it's about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm about from here to those back doors. And all I'm doing is staring at my mom, because the only thought I have is she better have a buck. For me to walk that distance, go into that lady's place of business, and one more time startle her with my presence, which would be an ongoing thing in my life. And without batting an eye, I ask that lady for a couple bucks. And she breaks out her little Woolworth wallet, and a picture of me falls out when I'm 8 years old on a Little League team. The only decent picture she'd ever have. And she proceeds to give me that $1 and then $2. and I take that money and I run off to Wilmington where I'm going to die. Now, the thing that brings it home to me tonight, and every time I'm with you folks, is that you take this same man, new in Alcoholics Anonymous, and you stick me in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous that's going to save my life with every action that I take, and with my so-called desperation and willing to go to any lengthness. How come when my life depends on it, and you put a secretary of a meeting that same distance as me and my mom in that parking lot, how come when my life depends on it, I can't walk that same distance and ask a man for a job at a meeting that's going to save my life? But yet I can walk that distance and use my mom and other people like her time and time and time and time again. And I'm here to share with you, if you're new, that it's been my experience that if my alcoholism doesn't kill me, my selfishness and my self-centeredness will. Make no mistake about that. Which is why it's necessary for a man with a little over 28 years to still be close to and active in a program called Alcoholics Anonymous, and even more so a home group. For one reason and one reason only. And if you don't hear a thing that I say all night, I don't blame you, but I hope you hear this. That I will never get so sober that I can't get drunk again. There is no place you get here. And I never want to forget that I could get so drunk that I can't make it back. And I never want to forget what it's like to stand outside your meetings all over Southern California, looking through your windows, staring at your meetings, wondering if I'll ever have a part of this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous. Will I ever be a part of this thing? Or will I always be on the outside watching this thing go by me like everything else? I never want to forget that. I've wanted to be with you folks for so long. But yet I had this thing in me that I couldn't get rid of. I never want to forget that. Now, my dad was a happy drunk. My dad was a happy singing the blues, Nat King Cole, Bobby Darin drunk. My dad loved to drink and sneak into his own damn house. It was an amazing thing, you know. And it was no secret because he had these big boots, you know, these refinery boots, you know, and he snuck in there one night and, you know, I could tell because he was stepping on my little bony chest, you know, and so I grabbed that boot and I said, you know, Pop, I says, why don't you have Mom make you a set of keys, you know? My God, she's up anyway, you know. I can hear the Hoover going now, for God's sake, you know. And man, my dad made drinking look good, you know. And my dad wasn't hard to find. In fact, he was always, or I was trying to hide from him. He'd always be around. Where is that son of a, you know, always looking for me and stuff. But I loved my dad, and I wanted to be like my dad for a long time. But one more time in an inventory in Alcoholics Anonymous, I never really loved my dad till I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and learn what love was. I knew I was supposed to love my mom and dad, but I didn't really. I was too afraid of them. I didn't trust either one of them. And that confused me as a kid. As much as I liked being around them and I loved what they were doing, I didn't trust either one of them. I didn't trust my mom for letting that guy bang her around at night and smack her around, and I didn't trust him for doing the same thing to her. And I was a confused little kid, and I didn't know where to go for any questions. And I didn't trust these folks around me, and I wanted to. I wanted to love and adore them. I didn't love my dad. I was afraid of him. I had this thing about 4 or 5 years old, this tremendous amount of guilt and shame is, how come you're not coming in between and keeping him from banging her around? And I'm a young little kid, and I'm wondering why I can't do that. I didn't love my dad. I was seeking his approval so he wouldn't bang me around. That'd be one of my biggest defects of character when I got sober, seeking somebody's approval. It happened to me in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got this sponsor, and I started seeking his approval. And you know what happens when I start seeking people's approval? I start keeping secrets because I want the nod. And that's the last person you want to keep a secret from is your sponsor. He knows you're a goof. You know what I mean? But I started this confusion with my dad, and I didn't want to, and I didn't trust him. And I'm doing all the things that all the other kids are doing. And my dad was a hard-working guy, and he used to tell me, you don't know how good you got it. Back when I was your age, we really had it tough. And he was absolutely right. I've never known how good I've got it. I'm not one of these guys that's running around with a belt of gratitude every day. I've got to be beaten half to death to be grateful for the life I got today. If there's any belt that I'm wearing, it's about a 5-inch belt of lazy ass that's strapped around here, you know. That my entire life I was so wrapped up in me that I was afraid to do just the average things like do chores, or I thought the old man was picking on me. And I've had this tremendous ego and this 5-inch belt of lazy ass. And what happens when you're like me and you're selfish and you're self-centered is you grow up through life and you do average things expecting standing ovations. You go to work and you think the boss is up in the window going, "Oh, for God's sakes, look at that guy. My God, man, he just put in 8 hours a day, man. They don't make them like that anymore," you know what I mean? Hell, I'm like that with my wife, Rosie. It wasn't too long ago I put a toilet seat on for her. Like she's the only one that uses it, right? You know? But I put on this beautiful maple toilet seat. And we're busy in AA, and every night we cross each other in the hallway, you know, and she'll go to the restroom and I'll go to the bed. And she would go in there, and week after week, month after month, she never mentioned a thing about that toilet seat. Every night she'd be in there. I'd be on that bed just rocking, man. What's wrong with these women in AA? What are they teaching them at these stag meetings, man? You know? Who does she think put that thing on there? God? Old Lawrence of Torrance bolted that baby on there, for God's sakes, you know? It drove me nuts. I finally had to tell her one night. She come out of there and I said, "You know, that's a brand new piece of wood you've been sitting on in there, you know." And she goes, "I know, and it's been loose, you know." There's no pleasing these women around here. All I know is about 11 years old, I'm doing all these other things that all the kids are doing. And they seem to be getting a certain satisfaction out of normal living. And I seem to be dragging like there's an anchor behind me. And all the kids are adjusting to life and doing all these things, and I seem to be consumed in me at an early age. Got this tremendous amount of fear. I can play ball, I can skip school, I can do everything that everybody else is doing, but I got this tremendous amount of fear when I'm alone. All I know is about 11 years old, there was 4 of us in a garage, and we started passing around a bottle of 4 Rose whiskey. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have that ball of fear and that loud head. And I've always had a loud head. To this day, my head's always had power over me. I've got the kind of head that loves to chat. You know what I mean? And no matter how tired you are, the more it wants to chat. Right? You could be physically beat. Physically beat last night. Come home from San Diego. "Larry, let's chat. Come on, I know you're in there. Let's talk about when you were a baby and bring you right up to date, for God's sakes," you know. And the frustrating thing about that is we just did it the night before, you know. And then once it has me, I got to start worrying, you know. I love to worry. It makes me feel like I've got something to live for, you know what I mean? But I never worry about anything good. I worry about imagined stuff, you know. I worry about, you know, like what would happen if my pool started leaking? You know, where's that water go? Does it go into my neighbor's yard? Does it go underneath the house? Does it go underneath the pool? Is the backyard going to cave in? Where in the hell does that water go? It's got to go somewhere, you know. And that bothered me all night last night, you know. I don't own a pool. I got a dog, you know what I mean? I was thinking about getting one, though, you know, but I'm going to think about it some more, you know. I got to find out where that water goes. Just a busy kid, busy head, never knew anything about God or church, took a drink at 11 years old, and you know what? Evened out the playing field. Evened out the playing field. Now, I didn't, you know, go to Skid Row the next day and lose my paper out and come to AA, like some of us, you know, but I never forgot that little place that it took me to. And the older I got, the more I leaned on it. And the more responsibility that would come my way, and the older that I got, I seemed to have this resistance towards growing up. I have this automatic resistance, this pull from the center. And everybody else seems to be adjusting and grasping and developing manner of lives, and they have goals and ideas, and I'm frozen. And the thing that thaws me out better than anything I know is a shot of my old man Thunderbird in the garage. And I'm a freshman in high school. And a couple of years before that, about a year before that, I'm walking the neighborhood because I feel more apart under the lights at midnight than at my own dinner table. I go by this garage, and these guys are working on some dragsters. And I love the sound of a dragster firing up. And I poked my head in there. And I'm about 12, 13, 14 years old, and I start chasing tools for these guys that are running dragsters. And I started going with them to dragsters and drag meets and stuff like that. And I found a little camaraderie and something that made me feel a part of, you know. And I started, not doing too well in school and getting thrown out of school. And I'm a freshman in high school, and I start dating this little Mexican girl. She has a couple brothers. They like cars. They like lowered cars. They like to lower our cars, our 62 Chevys, right down to the ground, right? Get our hair up real big like a Bakersfield tumbleweed, right? Listen to the Four Tops and the Temptations and the OJs and Marvin Gaye, and God, I loved it, man. I was in my plumbing truck the other day, and the Four Tops came on and just started sinking in my damn truck. I had a Mexican girl named Lupe. She curled her hair up real big, and her sisters used these soup cans to curl her hair, and the noodles were stuck in there, I had my big hair and my white T-shirts and black khaki pants that came up to here. Women were telling me that men who were well endowed had big feet. I had a pair of 15-inch shoes I was driving around in. Had my big hair and my big feet, We'd be driving around drinking that wine, wondering what the hell you're looking at. What are you looking at, Now I know, man. Ran into a kid like that not too long ago. I'm in the Glendale Mall. This kid comes walking down the mall. He's all shaved like a cue ball. Got his mom's earrings on. He's got a big hole in his ear so you could put your finger in there and just grab that son of a gun, I think they ought to put spinners in there. Put some rims in there. Put a clock in there, And he's got a ball bearing in his ear. He's got a ring up here. He's got a ball bearing in his nose. Got a ring in his lip. A ball bearing in his tongue. Got a chain to his wallet. I walk by him and he goes, "What are you looking at?" I says, "I don't have a damn clue what I'm looking at, I wanted to squirt him with some WD-40 to make sure he keeps walking, you know what I mean? So we start dogging each other, and then sooner or later we start talking and stuff like that. And now I sponsor the guy. Lives down in Chula Vista. His name's Ron, old Navy guy. Refused, when you start sponsoring people, you usually get these guys with your defects of character times 10. And this guy was a lazy ass. Wasn't going to work for all the tea in China. He'd be calling me up new. "What do you want me to do, sponsor?" And I said, "Well, Ronnie," why don't you unlock yourself, for God's sakes, He says, "Well, I go to these meetings and I feel so different." I said, "Really?" I said, "Maybe you're the only one wrapped up in a chain link fence. How about that, And he wouldn't go to work. I said, the guys that I sponsor, we're self-supporting. We have jobs, And I said, "You better get yourself a job or you may need to find somebody else to sponsor you, kid." And so he dragged his feet, and finally this guy, after about 3 months, he calls me up excited. You know how they are when they're excited. "Spons, got to talk to you. I finally got a job, man. I got a job." And he's excited. I'm excited. "That's great, kid. What are you going to be doing?" Now, I don't mean to offend anybody, but what the hell, we're in Reno. So he says, "I got a job," and he says, 2 to 3 times a week, I go to the sperm bank. Now, I could just see this guy every morning, wrapping his lunch, throwing his gloves in there, grabbing that lunch bucket, grabbing that Hustler magazine, heading off to work, going to that hands-on job, He's doing good now. But we bounced around. I remember one time, man, me and Loopy and these other guys were drinking that 151 rum, boy. That'll set you free. We're drinking that stuff, going up and down Whittier Boulevard. Finally, we get up to Torrance Boulevard. She says, "What else?" She goes, "Why don't you go in the Jack in the Box and talk to the puppet?" She thinks he's real or something, you know what I mean? And I can't see the puppet, man. I'm buzzed on that 151, and, I see about 3 puppets there, and I pull up, and I hear that guy, "Can I have your order, please?" And he starts yelling at me. So I'm searching for the puppet, and I go around the menu and I run over the puppet. His head's hanging down. The cops come, and they arrest me. They throw me on the hood of the car. I don't drive till I'm 30. They shatter my hair all over the parking lot. Big deal. Let Rudy drive. There's nothing like riding shotgun. And there isn't, man. There's nothing like riding shotgun. You get to sit on the passenger side and drink that old cheap wine and make that magical discovery how good you look in that little mirror. Boy, you want to get an alkie's attention, man. Put that mirror in front of them, huh? Boy, look at you. You ought to be an underwear model, for God's sakes, you know. You don't wear any, but what the hell, you know. And check yourself out in that mirror. Your hair's all big and flat from laying on the window. You got some cigarette butt stuck in there. You got 30 pounds of tamale puke on your chest, you know, and you feel like dancing when you look like that, you know. I do. I feel a song coming on, man, you know, and bounce over to Shanghai Reds or the Leonardo's, man, and you go into that bar and you're looking for the salsa queen, you know. You got your big feet. You feel like you're skiing through there, you know. You know, and you see her, man. There she is. She's at the back of the bar, man, and she is hot. Her hair's all curly and big. She's got flies stuck in her hair. She's got tamale puke on her chest, you know, and she's back there gnawing on a pickled pig feet, you know, and I like that about a woman, you know. I go sliding up to her and I start talking to this gal, letting her smell that 151 on my breath, you know. And I don't talk to her for more than 15 minutes. And her lesbian girlfriend comes over and starts beating the snot out of me. Just bam, you know. And I want to make a run from out of there, and my big feet are caught between the footrail and the bar, and I can't get out of there, man. And she's just beating the snot out of me for about 2 hours, it seemed like. And the only thought I had is, when this bag is done, I'm going to kick her ass, you know. But for those 2 hours, man, I was in magic land. And you know, that's the story of my life, man. That every time I drank, I stepped into this big, beautiful window. And it was the most peaceful place I'd ever found. And I would never find that place again. I would never find a place like that when I was sober. The only place that I could find that was after about 3 shots. Every meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, we hear about our experience, strength, and hope. What it used to be like, what happened, and what we're like today. And what that really is, if you really check it out, it's that alcoholic's search for peace. You look back over your life, and it's just our search for peace. And if you be alcoholic like I'm alcoholic, the only place you ever found peace was after about 3 shots. But the trouble with our lethal illness that we have is that peace of mind that we talk about is all an illusion. It isn't really happening. That thing about it shutting it off and making you feel strong and doing this doesn't happen to everybody that drinks. And it's not even really happening to us. It's that state of illusion that they talk about. But we buy it every time. It takes us into a place, and I tell you, if you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous or a little crusty here, if we don't find that peace of mind through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, we're destined to search for it where we once found it again. 3 shots of whiskey. We've got to find that peace of mind. Why would that be? Because sobriety drives us to drink. And the longer we stay sober, the worse we feel. And we come to AA, and we come to these meetings, and we see these guys with these ties on, and they say stuff like, 30 days ago, I was on the streets of Los Angeles. Now I'm the president of the Bank of America. Thank you. You know, and man, I came in with that guy, you know. That's the worst place for an alkie to be, is not drinking and not doing AA. And wondering what's going on. That's the worst place for an alcoholic to be, man. And I hope I never forget that. But I'm bouncing around with these guys, and I think, man, there's nothing like this lowrider thing. And like I said, man, every time I drank, that little window would open up, and I was in the safest place. And for a long, long time, you could count on it. And I could bounce back the next morning, and there was that morning drink, and everything was just no problem with the drinking yet. Except for my life, the more I drank, the smaller that window got. And 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 by the time I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, there was no big, beautiful window when I drank. There was just this obsession. There was just this thought that maybe this time it's going to be different. You see, I'm an alcoholic. The memory of my last drunk hasn't sufficient force to keep me sober. And it scares a lot of people around me. But no matter how bad that bottom is, The memory of my last drunk hasn't sufficient force to keep me sober. Why would that be? Because the pain of sobriety pushes out the pain of that old drunk. And if I don't do something about that peace of mind today, I'm destined to go. I'm the type of drunk that every time I drink and I get sober, I can see the physical things happening to my body. I can see the blood, the sores, things getting huge, my hands, my head, things going wrong with me physically. I'm the type of drunk that every time I get sober, I can see the faces and the memories and of the disgusting things that have happened. I introduced my mom and dad into a level of living that they never imagined existed. These innocent people from Detroit never knew about this life, that I was going to traipse in front of them time and time again. They didn't know that this thing existed. And every time I'm sober, I see their faces. And every time I'm sober, I see the threats of the institutions and stuff. Yet every time I'm sober, I have the ability, and it just takes days, weeks, or months, that I come up with a profound conclusion that this time it's going to be different. And it doesn't come to me in those words. It comes to me and screw it. You've been here before. It ain't working. The obsession of my life is how am I going to get this stuff to work in my life without it backfiring on me? How can I drink without this stuff doing what it does to me? How can I control and enjoy this drunk? How can I sneak up on it? How can I do this, man? And when you're obsessed with a thought like that, how can you think about anything else? I couldn't. I had no dreams. Around 1969, everybody's going places, and they're going to Vietnam, and I'm wondering what I'm going to do with my life. So I thought me and my buddy would go to Detroit and find my roots. And we wound up in Phoenix. I'm over at Phoenix after about, over off of 7th and Roosevelt at the Apache Hotel. And the Apache's about 6 floors high. Everybody's got a bathroom. It's in the hallway. Everybody's got a TV. It's in the lobby. $30 a month. You got a little window. You got a Murphy bed, and you got a little sink in there, a little hot plate. And I look out my little window, and I drink, and I dream, and I die, and I know one of these days it ain't going to be like this. One of these days I'm going to have a little lunch bucket and a job. If I can get it all together. And I'm obsessed with having some type of normal life, yet I wouldn't know what it was if it bit me in the knee. But I'm sure that if I can just get a car and an apartment and a job, if I can get all that going, everything will be all right. And you know what? I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I got obsessed with the same thing. In fact, to the untrained eye, it looks like that's what happens here. The people stop drinking and they get little jobs and they get little rooms and they get little cars and they get people to dance with. And to the untrained eye, it looks like the treatment for alcoholism is normal living. And nothing could be further from the truth. You people have taught me, and it's been my experience, that the treatment for this lethal illness that I have has nothing to do with the material. You don't need to come to AA to get those things. All it takes is hard work and good fortune. But the treatment to this disease will be and always will be me, you, and that book and the perpetuation of this gift. The most blessed gift a guy like me can have is to perpetuate this gift. Not from up here, but from down there where I live. And I learned to do that in a home group. I learned about respect for my fellow man in my home group, and I was able to take that outside. I didn't know that. I'm up in that little room, and I'm drinking that wine, and I got that morning drink, and I can't start a day without it, and I'm shaking so much that it shakes the whole hallway now. And I can't leave that room unless I got something. And I'm afraid to be in there at night by myself. I'm afraid to look at myself in these reflections because I know what's happening. And the things that are starting to happen to me because of that cheap wine and vodka, I don't know what's going on. These unpredicted convulsions and stuff like that. I go down to the Wagon Wheel Bar, my favorite bar. It has no windows, just a dirty purple curtain blowing in and out of it. I meet a guy named Ernie. Ernie's from Tennessee. Ernie says, I know what we're going to do, Larry. He says, I know a plumber. He says, come in here the next morning and I'll introduce you to this plumber. He introduces me to this plumber, and this guy says, come with me. And I came with him, and he stuck me underneath the house. He says, you stay under there. He says, you stay under there all day. All I want you to do is hang copper. And he gave me a transistor radio. And I had a pint of Kessler's. And I'm underneath this house, and I figure, my God, I says, I'm on top of the world. I've got a transistor radio. I got a pint. I got this stray cat looking at me. I got a pet now, I figure, man, I'm on top of the world. I'm going to just start this day off right. And I start sipping on that old warm bourbon. 9 hours later, they're dragging me out from underneath the house. I got drunk. I busted up through the floor, robbed a lady of all of her jewelry. They're dragging me out. The cat comes running out with a bunch of necklaces on, you know. Got fired from that job. Went back to the wagon wheel bar. Ernie says, I know what we're going to do, Larry. He says, not too far from here is a horse track. He says, we're going to get you down to 95 pounds. You're going to be a jockey. And I figured, okay, we're going to start working out or something like that, you know. And he gave me a bag of speed. And I don't do speed. I just been drinking and doing heroin, minding my own business. I'm not going to be no Afghan maker, you know. And he says, no. He says, don't make that face, you know. Burnt food is good for your gums. No, he says, no, you know, just take this stuff and we'll get you down to 95 pounds and we'll go get our colors and we'll go weigh you in. I'll come back in about 2 months and we'll go weigh you in. He was sure it was going to work. Hell, he was 110, you know. Well, he came back 2 weeks later, and I'm stuck in that little room, right? I haven't moved an inch. I just, you know, eating that stuff and chasing a fly around my room, you know, and looking out this little window every 10 seconds. What's that? What's that? You know, seeing these black and white flashes, and that's the sun going up and down, you know. He comes back and he goes, you couldn't have possibly eaten all that. Well, I did. You know, I'm all frothy. My hair's up, you know, and been chasing a fly. Anything white that's been on the ground, I've been firing up, you know. It could have been a toenail and I'd fire that thing up, you know. Worst 18 days of my life, man. Got a job with another plumber and worked for about 2 hours. And I found out that the guy was younger than me and I'm not working for a kid. So I did what any honorable man would do. I faked a knee injury. Went to the county hospital. On the way down there, got me a pint of Kessler's. Went to the county hospital. He wrote me a prescription for Percodan. And when the doctor left, he left a box of prescription pads that he wanted me to have. You know how you can tell these things, you know. Must be God talking to me, you know. Walked out with that little box of prescription pads, and me and Ernie went down to the bar and we met some guys down in Tucson, and we started writing prescriptions for everything. Seconal, Nembutal, Tuinal, you name it all. I wrote it all. Just, you know, damn near took it all too. And after about 9 months they caught up with me, and when you're loaded on whiskey and barbiturates, there's no freeway chase, you know. There he goes on the 17. Look at that son of a gun go, you know. It ain't happening like that. It was just a matter of the sheriff coming into the old Busy Bee Hotel going, there he is under there, you know. Yeah, that's him. He butt naked again, you know. Sent me away for about 8 or 9 months. No big-time convict here. Came out of there, and they gave me a little $45 voucher for the Continental Trailways to come back to Los Angeles. I go to L.A. City Hall. They put me on Anabuse, and they give me a little room in downtown Torrance at the Greyhound Hotel. In 1974, I'm at the Greyhound. I'm on this Anabuse. I'm 2 months without anything in my system, drugs, alcohol, nothing, for the first time in my life in a long, long time. I go to Volt and I get this little labor job at a refinery. I don't drive till I'm 32, so I have to take a bus, and I take this bus into El Segundo. I'm 3 hours early before the job. I don't know what to do, so I go to a Little League dugout and I hide out over there and smoke, and within an hour I'm going out of my mind, and I don't know why. I'm in between hysterical and maniacal. My paranoia is so bad that I'm hallucinating. And I'm in a place that, I mean, the cord is unplugged now. And I know it's for keeps. Somebody called the paramedics. They take me to the Harbor General Hospital. They looked at my jacket. They seen by the looks of some of the things that have been going on that maybe I need to go to a state hospital to be observed for 30 or 60 days. And they sent me off to a state hospital. A year later, I got out. Totally observed, you know. And they gave me certain medications for certain things. But I tell you one thing, you can't medicate away in an alcoholic. This time it's going to be different. And they tried to erase my memory and take away some things. And thank God they didn't. Because in Alcoholics Anonymous, that's been my saving grace. That my past has become my greatest asset. And after 2 months, I ran out of Thorazine, and they found me over at Alvaro Street behind the Chevron station. I've run out of Thorazine, and I'm curled up like a dead dog, a public nuisance. And I'm not drunk. Been drunk for a while down there. And they rolled me up for a public nuisance, and they sent me up to Wayside. And I'm up at Wayside for about 40 days, and they put about 50 or 60 of us in a black and white bus. They're going to send us down to South Bay Courthouse, where I'm going to be tried and convicted and sent up on a violation. And I'm in a holding tank in a courthouse about the size of this section over there, and I'm on a concrete floor with my Vons bag and no hope. And about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, everybody's gone. All the buses are gone. All the other guys are gone. Just me and old bologna sandwiches. And I'm wondering where I'm going to go now. And in 1975, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a little Scottish man with a patch opened up a jail door. And he slid open this jail door, and he looked in there, and he says, "Aye, lad." He said, "Are you Larry Thomas?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He says, "Why don't you come with me, son? We're going to AA." And I said, my God, to myself, I said, "What's AA? I've heard of OR and PO, but what's AA, you know? And who's this little Scottish pirate all of a sudden, you know? Aye, lad, you know?" And, you know, looking back all these years, I know what that guy was. He's a dinosaur in Alcoholics Anonymous now, but we call him a trusted servant. And what made that man a trusted servant was simply this. He had no business being there. He wasn't down there to speak. He wasn't down there for the glory. He was a trusted servant. In fact, he had no business being there. He wasn't a probation officer. He wasn't a counselor. He was a little refinery worker who just got the worst news of his life. And that was his wife was dying immediately of a terminal disease. He knew she was in good hands, but he knew he wasn't. But you see, somewhere in his home group, somewhere in his book studies, somewhere in his 12 and 12 studies, that man was able to grasp and develop a manner of living that expressed itself in our book so clearly. That's this. Practical experience tells us that nothing will ensure immunity from drinking than intensive work with other alcoholics. This works when other activities fail. And that thought came to him, and he whipped his little 54 Chevy around, and he went to the South Bay Courthouse. He talked to Judge Foy and Judge Hollingsworth, and they said, "I think we got a guy for you." And he went down to that little holding tank, and he said, "Come with me, lad, we're going to AA." And that man took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in 1975. And I'm ready for a long ride up north and maybe some lunch. He takes me 15 minutes to my first meeting, and in that car, he nails me like only these old-timers can. He says, "Son, I know you've had a tough life and you feel different. By golly, I've been feeling different my entire life. That's my whole M.O. is different. I feel different, I think different, I look different, everything about me is different. No matter what group around, I always feel different. It's just a matter of time." He said, "Son, I know you've had a tough life and you feel different." He says, "But I can't wait for you to meet the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I am so excited that you're going to meet these people." And he said, "Son, in Alcoholics Anonymous, the more different you feel, the more qualified you are." He says, "Nobody comes here happy and well-adjusted, that's for damn sure, you know." And he took me for this 15-minute car ride, and he rolled up to this dirty, stinky, filthy, pukey little Alano club called the Torrance Lameda Alano Club. I'd never seen that word before in my life. What the hell is an Alano? Is that like an animal? Watch for crossing Alanos or something like that? Or is it a Samoan bar maybe or something, you know? What is an Alano? And he rolled up to this club, and there's all the Alanos. Everybody's got a nickname and a tattoo, trying to get a cup on a wall, get their name on a brick or some shit, you know. He started introducing me to all these goofy people, Indian Genie and Captain Bob and Tennessee Bill and Singing Sam and Serenity Sam and Bicycle Ray and Santa Claus Ray, Dancing Pete, Whistling Butt, all these other people. I said, man, I just left a group of people like this, you know. Little Moose is running across the meeting. "Hi, honey, my name is Moose, and I'm expecting a miracle." Well, I said, "I bet you are." I said, "I'm not it, you know." This big transvestite comes out of the card room. He starts circling me like a helicopter in Norwalk, you know. And about 3 times around, he lands. He comes running over to me in his new moo-moo, you know. "I can't wait to take you to our candlelight meeting." I said, "I don't think so, big guy, you know. Not till I get a year anyway, you know." I turned to Alex. I said, "My God, that guy's got big feet, man." I said, "What the hell's with this?" And I looked around that room. I said, "My God, if this AA, I don't want any part of this thing." And if that's what's in that book, I'm not going to crack that thing either. And from 1975 to 1982, I came in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the biggest lie that I've ever told myself. I had not touched Alcoholics Anonymous. But I told myself that lie for years. All I did is I did what I'd done my entire life. I sat in a room waiting for people to do something for me. I sat in a room waiting for something and somebody to do something to me. I've spent my entire life sitting in rooms waiting for the state or the county or somebody to give me a check or a block of cheese or something. I always had my hand out. And I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I had the same attitude. What are you going to do for me? What can I get from you? Sat in a room waiting for you to do something to me. And little did I know that you were waiting for God to do something through me. And that if you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous, the only thing that I can tell you that you're going to be prepared to do is maybe be prepared to be divinely inconvenienced for the rest of your damn life. How about that, you know? This is the longest thing I've ever done against my will, that's for damn sure, you know. I didn't get up today and go, yippee, let's fly to Reno, you know what I mean? And it seems like for people like me who are secretly insane, we have to do the uncomfortable to get comfortable here. And I didn't know that being new. I sat in there waiting for something to happen to me, and I didn't get anything but physically sober and mentally ill. And I did what I always did. I ran away and found my own peace of mind one more time trying to. 75 to 82. And every time I called Alcoholics Anonymous, somebody would come and get me. Thank God for central office. And they would always send me this Montana cowboy. This bald-headed carpenter. A guy by the name of Don. And he would come to the Don Hotel or find me out there by a gas meter in an alley. You ready to come to AA, kid? Let's go to a meeting. In 1980, I'm up at the Don Hotel. And every time people would come and get me, they were always clean and they were sharp. And that's why I like to wear a tie when I'm with you. You people taught me how to get one. You people taught me how to hold a job. You people taught me about having respect for the thing that's saving my life. And that maybe every now and then when I have respect for the thing that's saving my life, I can show respect to a guy named a sponsor or a boss or even a dad or a wife. See, I'm that guy demanding respect. I'm that guy that's pounding his fist and demanding things coming this way. I'm this guy that's selfish and self-centered, wanting everybody to do for him and not lift a finger. You see, I'm that guy. I'm that coward of a man. I'm that man who's got the foul mouth and the hostility because I'm afraid inside because I don't know how to be a man. I don't know what peace of mind is. See, I'm that guy. And every time I called Alcoholics Anonymous, this little bald-headed carpenter would come to me. In 1980, I'm over at the Don Hotel over there in Wilmington. I'm up on the 3rd floor. I've got a half pint of bourbon cut in half. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm watching Jeopardy so I could really feel like an idiot. Every now and then you get one right. Donald Duck. Yeah, you know. 10 o'clock in the morning, I hear this, Larry, it's Don. I said, my God, it's that guy from AA. I didn't even call him and he's coming over here. He says, can I come in? And he opened up his door. And he says, oh my God, kid, you had 15 days. What's going on with you? And I remember looking at that guy and taking a shot off of that bourbon bottle. And I remember telling him, Don, I said, you've been trying real hard, but I don't want what you have. And I don't want what you got. And if I ever get that bad, I'll know what to do. Now just get the hell out of my room and let me do what I want to do. The cry of this alcoholic my entire life, and the moment that I said that, it struck a chord in the back of my head that shot me back to 1967 when me and the old man are fighting. I'm 16 years old. He's kicking me out of the house as I'm getting drunk and selling dope at school. And he says, you want to live like that? That's your business, but I got a daughter and a wife and you ain't going to do that here. Now get the hell out of here. And I went after the old man. Made physical contact with my father. Would be able to brag about that at the bars like it was some big deal. And lo and behold, I come to a 4th and 5th step in Alcoholics Anonymous. And what was the thing that I was so ashamed of? Was striking that man. And how ashamed that made me feel. It shot me back to 1972 when I'm sneaking up on my mom one more time. 1 o'clock in the morning. She doesn't know where her drunken son is, and I come in through the back door. She's on the couch watching Johnny Carson. I got my drunken mud on, and she starts crying. She lays my head on her lap, and she starts rocking and praying to this Michigan God to please help her baby boy. And I can feel these tears hitting my cheek as I'm laying on her lap. And the only thought that I have, I say, Mom, it ain't that bad. It's going to be all right, Mom. Don't you worry about a thing. Why don't you run off and go to bed? And she runs off and she goes to bed. She's not gone for more than 5 minutes, and I remembered, you know what? She always had some wine underneath the garbage disposal there. I know she's got some in there. I know that there's a half pint in the kitchen somewhere. I start tearing apart my mom's kitchen and going through the cupboards and stuff like that. She comes down the hallway. She says, honey, what's wrong? I said, don't you, honey, what's wrong with me? And I start banging that little lady till I get blood out of her nose, demanding that she come up with a bottle that she had no idea was there. That I wake up the next morning and the empty was in the trash. Let me do what I want to do. All that went by me is about 10 seconds as the only answer to life. That little bald-headed carpenter left my room. And I'm stuck with the memory of you. And I can't stay drunk and I can't stay sober, and there is no in-between. And I'm hoping that this is the last night that I've ever got to do this, and I keep coming to and having to do that stuff day in and day out because I don't know how to live. I can't live with it and I can't live without it. And everything in me wants to stop, but I just can't. I put my little feet on the ground and I'm saying, this is the day. And it's just a matter of hours that I'm banging on that liquor store wondering when he's going to open up. Walking the streets at night because I'm afraid to be by myself in a room. And on May 2nd, 1982, I'm checking into the Beacon Light Mission in downtown Wilmington. I'm going to go sing for my beans, get out of the rain. And I run across the thing, and I look at myself in a Woolworths window, and there I was. I'm 120 pounds, and I'm yellow. I got everything I owned on my back. My hair's down to my shoulders. I'm looking in there, and I'm thinking, my God, and I'm not drunk. I'm looking at me with clear eyes, and I go, whatever happened to my dreams? I never had any. I had one dream. How can I get this stuff to work? How can I get this stuff to work in my life? Because I'm afraid to be without it. I don't know how to be without it, and I know I can't. There's got to be a way to beat this thing. And I looked at myself, and I did what I always did. I panhandled some money, and I called up Alcoholics Anonymous. I got the South Bay Central office, and who do I get? I get Don. I said, Don, this is Larry. I've just checked into the mission. I'm ready to come back to Alcoholics Anonymous. Will you come and get me? And he told me the most profound thing I've ever heard in my life. He said, no. He says, you know where we are. We know what we got. He said, why don't you get your rusty ass down here? I'm tired of chasing after you. And he hung up. I said, my God, whatever happened to that AA love? I just heard it. And for the first time in my life, it was up to me to come to you. It was no longer necessary for the good people of Alcoholics Anonymous to be inconvenienced with my nonsense. And I huddled up in this little corner by the mission, and I didn't have a big book, but I had a Bible. And I had my shoes tied to my feet because I didn't want anybody to steal them. And there was about 12 beds in there. And I thought to myself, I was able to concede to my innermost self by looking at my track record that I was an alcoholic. And what it came to me, and it's not that I'm an alcoholic, that I couldn't drink. It didn't come to me, I'm an alcoholic, I shouldn't drink. It came to me like this. I'm going to drink again, and I know it. I know that this isn't enough to keep me sober, and I'm so afraid that I'm going to drink again. And I had a fear hit me because I knew there wasn't a condition in my life that would keep me from drinking. No matter what my bottom was, it didn't have sufficient force. I knew it was a matter of time that head would wear me down, because that's when my alcoholism strikes me, when I'm sober. And I was so afraid, man, that this was going to get me again. And I knew that I was an alcoholic because I'm going to drink again. To this day, I'm an alcoholic and I can drink again. Everything in me is faced that way. I will never get so sober that I can't get drunk again. And I took the longest walk of my life, that 10 miles, to that little Alano club with my poopy pants and no hope. And every step of the way, my head's going, you ain't going to make it. You've been here before. This is a bunch of nonsense, man. Duck into here and get a half pint. Duck into here and give a short dog. And I walked up to that little Alano club, and I asked them where Don was, and they said he's in the back. And I waddled up to that guy, and I asked him something I never asked a man in my entire life. The hardest question I ever did. I said, Don, I don't know what to do with my life. Would you be my sponsor? And that guy lit up like a chandelier for about 5 seconds, then he lit into me for about 20 minutes. And he gave me the Declaration of Independence. You make the effort, I make the effort. You don't make the effort, don't bother me, Larry. I've got guys that want to stay sober. I'm not here to drag you through your sobriety, kid. And that guy was my sponsor. And he became a trusted servant, because he became the first man in my life that I trusted. It was based on trust. I gave him every little lie and every conniving thing that I've ever done. And I was able to trust that guy because of one reason. He understood what I was talking about. The magic word in Alcoholics Anonymous. I understand. I've done that too. And this is what we're going to do. Don't you be alarmed if you're new. Don't you be alarmed with all the things in your past and what you've did, and maybe these people won't understand. I want to tell you something about those secrets. That if it hasn't been done in Alcoholics Anonymous, it hasn't been thought of. And I was so afraid that my sponsor was going to throw me out of that car, because this stuff had been in here for a while. You know what I mean? And when I did that inventory, I just thought for sure, man, he's going to go, huh? What? You what? Get the hell out of my car, you know. You shouldn't even have any pets, for God's sakes, you know. But that man did like people do in Alcoholics Anonymous. They're not shocked because they've done similar. They've been there. They know what you're doing. And that man was my first sponsor. The most powerful thing we have in here is that book and sponsorship and a home group. And I love being a part of all of those things. That man was my sponsor for a couple years, and I started judging him and fading. He started showing me his humanness, and I was demanding perfection. You see, isn't it like a loser to demand perfection? Not out of himself. He seeks it in you, you know. And the man started showing me that he was human, and he shocked me, and I got scared. And I started holding secrets, and I started backing away from my first sponsor, and I started going crazy in Alcoholics Anonymous, because I've got untreated alcoholism, and I'm not drinking, and I'm 2 years sober. And I'm wondering what gun to use at the end of the meeting. For an hour and a half, I'm good, but half hour after meeting time, I take off my AA face, and I go home and die, and I wonder what bus I should throw myself in front of, because I know I've come to that point. And a man come down to Alcoholics Anonymous, and he told me what I was in front of all those people. He said, you're an AA pimp, you're a loser. He says, there's a triangle in Alcoholics Anonymous, son, I hope you find it. And I followed that man to my home group today. I was never part of a home group. And that man's my sponsor, and my home group is the Big Book Group of Bellflower, California. And they say home is where your heart is, and that's where my heart is. You see, that group does something for me. It lets me recreate this atmosphere that was created for me. We come to my home group and we have little jobs. And you know why we have these little jobs? Because if you're new, when you come to our meeting, there's not a thing you have to do. The chairs are up, the coffee's made, the literature's out. We got greeters. There's nothing for you to do if you're new, but to come into that meeting and sit and listen to the sweet voice of a loving God that's expressed himself in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything's done for you for one reason, so that maybe you can sit and identify. And maybe you too can say to yourself, man, maybe I can do it with these folks. They seem to be happy, joyous, and free. Come join us if you will. And I got to take an inventory with that sponsor. I got to make some amends to some two most beautiful people in my life, my mother and father. And it took longer than an afternoon and a note. And I think one of the most beautiful results of an amends is that the final result is that you become friends. I think the final result that I got with my mom today is she's alive. It took a long time for that lady to hug me, and there's a rightfully reason. But you see, I've been a happily married man for about 13 years. And you know that every week I cheat on my wife. I date my mom. I love that lady. I love being with her. And I'm not there to be a service. I'm there to do something I was never able to do, and that's be a son. And you know, she's not afraid of me anymore. In fact, she's got peace of mind. That very thing that I snatched from her at an early age, she has now. You see, I started off this talk telling you that I was a loser. But you see, in an inventory in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a step further than that. And you losers know what I'm talking about. I'm a quitter. I've been quitting my entire life. And I started quitting at the age of 11. I started quitting listening to my mom and dad. I started quitting doing the decent things in life. And I've been quitting ever since.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
And because of people in Alcoholics Anonymous and a home group and a sponsor, quit is not in my vocabulary. We do not quit here in Alcoholics Anonymous. If that's one characteristic that Alcoholics Anonymous has, it's that principle that we don't talk about anymore called consistency. Let your actions be your faith. We don't need any more cheerleaders for God. We need people to do the work. And you people taught me about that. That action is the magic word. There's nothing like busy feet. I remember being 5 years sober and this sponsor telling me, and he gave me a routine of meetings to go. And I'm about 5 years sober, and I've got this Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday routine of meetings. And, man, I'm just locked in. And one Monday I woke up, man, and I just said, you know what, I ain't going. I'm not going today. I'm not going to call them. I'm not going to do my morning reading, and I'm not going to that Monday night meeting. I'm not going. And all day long I'm saying, man, I'm not going. Around noontime, I'm happy as hell, man. My sponsor calls me, what are you doing, kid? I said, I don't know, but I ain't going tonight. Jimmy cracked corn and I don't care, pal. You know, I ain't going, man. And we started talking. My head's all convinced I'm not going. I'm excited about not going. I get home. I take a shower. I'm still not going in my head. I'm taking a shower. I'm doing my hair. I'm shaving. I'm not going. Hi, my name is Larry. I'm an alcoholic, man. My feet have been trained. You took the only decent thing I had left was my feet, and you trained my feet. It was just like when you knew where Eddie's liquor store was. And I went to these meetings for so long, for so often, that even when my head was telling me not to go, I was showing up there. I got to have power over my head for once in a while. I got the power of Alcoholics Anonymous to take that old goofy head of mine, throw it in the back seat, and take me to that meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous because my feet were trained. And once I was with you in that meeting, I was safe. You had me. I had my commitment, and my golly, I had the best meeting of my life because I knew for once in my life I connected with a power greater than myself, and it was that spirit of Alcoholics Anonymous. That very spirit that's in this room right now and in every meeting that I go to. That little spirit that you can't see, touch, or feel, but that you know that no matter what mood you come to in, you always leave a little better. You can't see or touch that or describe it, but you always feel a little better. And I love that about you guys. You see, I'm not a church guy. I don't know nothing about that. But you taught me to dive into that spirit and start trusting that spirit. And anyway, I've started to making these amends as a young man to my mom. And I tell you, my mom to this day, she lives up in a little retirement home and 6 floors, all these little ladies have the same little rooms. Everybody has balconies with real flowers. I'm visiting my mom a couple months ago, and we're sitting and talking, and I realize that my mom has plastic flowers on her balcony. And I'm thinking to myself, you tightwad mooch, why don't you get your mom some real flowers? I said, yeah, Mom. I said, what are you doing with those plastic flowers? Oh, I don't know, honey, why? I says, we're going to get you some real flowers. I'm going to get you some roses and a flower bed, and I'm going to water them, and you're going to have real roses like these other ladies. I don't want them. I said, no, you don't got to pay for them. I'll pay for them. I'll water them. I'll put them in there, and you'll have roses and lilies, and you'll have real flowers. Honey, I don't want them. I said, no, Mom, you don't have to worry about it. I'll get it. But she says, Larry, I don't want any real flowers. I love my plastic flowers. She goes, I love to sit in my rocker and watch the hummingbirds suffer. You know. Oh, how can you deny that to the old gal? You know what I mean? But I tell you, one of the most beautiful friends that I've ever made was with my father. That man that I hated and I didn't understand for so long. Because of Alcoholics Anonymous and you guys, my sponsor taught me how to be with that guy. I didn't know what to talk to my dad about. I didn't know what to talk. My sponsor said, why don't you talk to him about things that interested him? Instead of you. You know what my dad loved to talk about? He loved to talk about the Navy. He loved to talk about the Navy, man. I remember when me and Rosie got married, he had us over one day and he had all of his memorabilia. I said, Dad, why don't you show us all your souvenirs from the war? And we came over that day and he had them all out. The flag, the knives, everything, pictures. He was so proud. And my dad got that little pancreatic cancer and stuff like that, and I got to take care of him. What a privilege that is. Isn't it amazing how these obligations in Alcoholics Anonymous turns into privileges? And I got to be a son, take care of his bills and wash him and clean him and step up to the plate. And take care of that guy and walk him out of the world that he walked me in. Don't be afraid of death. Why would you want to be sad about somebody going to paradise? You guys taught me that. And every time I seen that old man on Thursdays, I would kiss him. And every time I'd leave him, I would kiss him. Now, where would I learn that? Every Monday night, I'm in a home group. And every now and then, I give a guy a cake, and my sponsor gives me a cake. And we hug and we kiss each other on birthdays. And at the end of every meeting, we're grabbing hands to other men, and we're saying this Lord's Prayer. And you know, when it came time for me to show my old man some affection, I didn't feel weird about doing it. It was an honor. You people taught me that. And I got to walk that man out of this world like he walked me in, and I love him, and I love him today. And it was a Thursday night that he passed. And it was my 12 and 12 workshop night. And I called my sponsor, and I told him that Dad passed. He says, okay, son. He says, why don't you take care of business and come to the meeting tonight? And we took care of business, and I showed up at that night, and my sponsor knew. But none of the guys that I sponsored knew. I didn't want to bother him with it. I said, all right, AA, do your stuff. And nobody in that room knew what had happened to me and my dad that is passing. And little by little, every guy that I sponsored started coming up. And they started telling me their flat tire stories. And that wife stories and got fired stories. And little by little, my primary purpose got into focus. That Dad was in good hands, and I knew that I wasn't. But the people of Alcoholics Anonymous, those ones that Alex couldn't wait for me to meet one more time, brought me back together. 2 weeks later, it's another Thursday, and it's 12 and 12 night, and I get a call from my sponsor. He says, Larry, what are you doing, son? And I said, well, I'm getting ready to go to 12 and 12. And my sponsor knew that on every Thursday, me and my dad had chili. That was our chili night. And my sponsor called me up and he says, why don't you come and get me? Let's go have some chili, son. And me and my sponsor have been having chili every Thursday. He says, Larry, I never had a son in AA. And you're about the closest thing that I got. And he says, I always want you to remember, son, there's nothing more that you have to do that you can do to make me love you anymore. You don't have to do anything to make me love you anymore. And you don't have to do anything less to make me love you any less. He says, I just love you. He says, all I want you to do, Larry, is to carry this message of Alcoholics Anonymous. And remember your primary purpose. And seek ye first the kingdom, son. He always told me that, and I didn't know what he meant. And isn't that amazing that every time I'm with you, I feel like I'm in His kingdom? That my primary purpose is to carry this message. That I have no other purpose. That the greatest gift I have is to carry this message not from up here, but down in here, where you people are. The people that I was dying to meet. To be a part of that spirit is quite the privilege for a guy like me. And to carry that message to an alcoholic who suffers is my greatest blessing. I can stand up here and tell you about all the blessings that I have in my life. My wife, my child, my career. And then, like with most people, I'll hang myself with my great blessings because I forget to come back to the place that blessed me when no one else would. You are my greatest blessing. You are what I've been born for, to see and find and been looking for my entire life. You are the children of God, and when I am with you, I find that peace that I was looking for my entire life. What are you going to do with a guy like me? I don't know much. I don't do much. God made me a plumber. He took me out of the gutter and stuck me in the sewers, for Christ's sake. And it's been a privilege to be with you tonight. And I want to thank these young men from Sacramento from driving up and listening to the old man one more time. And I'm here to tell you, if you're new, you may think you are in your final hour. But from where I stand with my good friends and my good friends in Alcoholics Anonymous, I have a feeling you're in your finest hour looking back. I think you're in your finest hour. And you can take it from this guy who's a stickler for evidence. I've never been a godly guy. I don't know what he is or what he looks like. All that I know, on a Friday night in Reno, Nevada, I see row after row after row of people who should be locked up, dead, or insane. And look at them tonight. You're sitting next to people you can't stand, going to give them a ride home. You know? We're happy, we're joyous, and we're free. We're not supposed to be here. We're supposed to be drunk or dead or insane, and look at us tonight. We're happy and we're joyous and we're free. Now, I've always been a stickler for evidence, and there's nothing more power than the evidential power of a good old meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think I will keep coming back and playing in that evidence one more night. Thanks a lot.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. And if that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.